So I've always been really interested in how the iPad is transitioning to become a genuine laptop replacement. And of course the Apple Pencil adds something to the mix, and it's mainly just for sort of, you think, okay, for drawing or art. It's not for a stylus, that's quite clear. That it's not very useful as a stylus. There's no need for a stylus with the iOS interface. But there's a third kind of use for the Apple Pencil that I've only just kind of really realized, and that is using it for handwriting. So it turns out the notebook maker Moleskine actually have an app on the iPad that sets out to recreate that sort of simulating experience of handwriting in a notebook. Just simple, no sort of software functions, just the simulation of pen and paper. And it's really quite wonderful. So it's really interesting when you handwrite text on the screen, or handwriting in general, you're kind of engaging that more creative process. It slows you down a little bit. It makes you think about what you're writing. It's a very different approach to just typing away, which is this mechanical process of just using your memory to know where the keys are. Obviously it is faster, you can write more words per minute when you're typing, but there's that lack of soul, and I think that's what people are kind of craving when they use real pen and paper. And the Moleskine app on the iPad is this interesting kind of combination of the benefits of a computer with that soul of writing on real paper. So what's particularly interesting about this app is it sets out to simulate pen and paper. And of course, the whole direction that Apple have gone with their interface design is to reject things that simulate real world things, the whole anti-skeuomorphic approach to design, which I'm completely behind, and I think it's a really great direction they've taken with the interface as a whole. But when you're talking about handwriting, of course, the goal is to recreate the real world experience. So that kind of interesting design philosophy is flipped on its head with this, and Moleskine have clearly acknowledged that and haven't shied away from really trying to create a good sort of synthesis of the real world experience, which is really fascinating. So all the things in the app look as close to reality as you can kind of imagine in a digital environment, and it's about the aesthetic of it all and that experience, and that's definitely the way they're building the app. So the app has loads of little subtle attention to detail that really make the experience quite memorable and engaging. Little sound effects and small gestures, animation, lots of slickness and subtlety. Makes the whole thing feel very polished and really rewarding to use. So usually with an iPad on a desk, I've had it on the beanbag, and it's been sort of a screen angle, where you tap away on it and you read off it, and it works well at that angle. But of course for handwriting, it's not so good. You don't want it to be up like that. You do want it to be flatter. And I actually sort of put the beanbag to one side and just had the iPad flat on the desk, and found that was actually quite refreshing, just to lean over it a little bit like you would with pen and paper on a desk and just write with it. So I'm going to look at the pen builder now, because I think that's one of the most exciting bits of this app. The way that it lets you create your own sort of toolbox of the pens and the pencils that you like out of this range of preset different types of pen and pencil. And then you can choose your colors as well, and you're not just choosing from a color wheel, which is very computery. You're actually choosing from a library of preset colors, and there's thousands, there's loads of them. It's not like you'll miss any colors, but each one has its own name, which is really quite a lovely little touch. It really acknowledges that sort of idea that you value your tools. So what's really nice about it is, you can add as many pens as you like, and I assume these just scroll down if you even fill up the space here, and you can tap it and then you get the pen builder, which is just brilliant. And you can choose which kind of pen, and you can flick up and down to choose the different colors, and left and right to change the saturation of that color, and then scroll this to change the brightness. And you can see the name of each color there, which is really nice. And you can choose fountain pens, and of course you can change the thickness here. And then once you tap out of that, it saves it into your little collection of tools, and you can just switch between them like that. 3 fingers dismisses the interface. You can change all these gestures and things as well, so you can just really set it up how you like. But always the focus is on that sort of getting out of your way, but also recreating that enjoyment from the real world experience. So another thing to look at is the eraser tool and the knife tool. So with the knife tool, you can actually sort of chop out a bit of the page and then move it around. So again, very, very big sort of emphasis on simulating a real world experience there. If you want to move something, you have to cut it out and move it. And I love that. And then the eraser works, much as a normal eraser. You can actually set that up to take away whole lines, or, each sort of word it would do in one go, or you can actually just do it spatially on the page. And that's the mode I've got, because that is the closer to the way it would work in real life. And it's got this interesting idea of infinite pages as well. So that's, like a notebook, you've got pages, you can't scroll up and down, you can only scroll left and right. And again, that actually works really well with this format, because, it's nice to just think in terms of those lines being a sort of restraint that lets you work. And, you're used to scrolling up and down, but when you're in this app, you see the page, you work with the page. When it's full, you go to the next page. Again, very much like a real book, and, very different to the way you normally work with computer files. And it's also got a whole bunch of different ways you can set up the canvas, different backgrounds, sort of different opacities for the background detail there, different colors. It also has a nice inverted mode, which is super nice. Basically, it's a very, very polished experience, and I'm dead impressed. So you might think, if they're pursuing the simulation so far, why don't you just use real pen and paper? But of course the app actually offers loads more than real pen and paper, because you can create your own set of pens and pencils with any color. You can have loads in here. You'd have to have a bag of pens and pencils with you to recreate that in the real world. So you actually, you do get more creativity as a result of using the virtual equivalent. Okay, so now onto the cost. It's a subscription app, which is quite interesting. Obviously, you don't sort of tend to think of something without a big online component as being a subscription app, but they do actually have their cloud syncing system running in the background. So there's a kind of a justification for it being a subscription charge. And I actually emailed them about this because I was kind of concerned they were saying they were offering a sync service to justify the cost, when obviously Apple's iCloud system has, that would be a useful mechanism for synchronizing your files. And they replied really thoughtfully and helpfully, and explained actually that the way they do store their data for the app is not normal file based. It's using a database, and I can kind of see the reason why that wouldn't work with iCloud, which is obviously file based. So I'm kind of happy to take their idea on that, and if I was obviously buying real notebooks, then I'd probably be spending as much as this anyway. So I don't resent it actually, and I've paid for the first year, and I'm very pleased I've done that. The other thing that's kind of interesting is there isn't actually any built-in backup mechanism for your work. So if something happens on their servers and that somehow trickles down to the app on your device, you have no way of backing it up. And I actually emailed them about this as well. And the data that is stored on their servers and on your device isn't included in your own iCloud backups either. So you are kind of stuck. You're relying on their service. But in fairness, their response to that concern of mine was that they are thinking about different options, and they may well think of a way of using at least the space on your iPad as a sort of backup in case something goes wrong on their end. So for now, I'm keeping that in mind, and I'm not putting anything on there that I couldn't live with losing. And obviously you can still export your stuff. So if you do create something that you want to save and you want to make sure you've got a backup, just export the file, and at least you've got the copy of it then. So one thing I've noticed that's interesting, kind of shows how much the app means to you when you use it. And I'm talking about this kind of conceptually, it's less tangible. It's more about how you feel when you're using it. And I like that about the whole experience. And that's how I feel when I see the app's icon. It's a wonderful icon, and you just want to get in there and use it. So I think that says a lot about how the app speaks to you when you use it. So I'd love to know if you're using this app or a different handwriting app, and if you're using handwriting on the iPad as a way of taking notes, where do you want to draw that line in terms of what the role of the iPad should do in terms of computing power versus the simplicity and the simulation of just pen and paper.